Free Golden Eagles for War Thunder. Download the app in the description below. Hey guys, welcome back to War Thunder and welcome to some Spitfire F Mk.22 gameplay. This video is a bit ironic because when I flew this thing out last time, which was in September, I encountered the exact same problem, just not on the same scale. You see, there is a big problem in this game that is called the bomber, and the bomber doesn't have much to do in this game. There's three ways a bomber can win a match. It can bomb the enemy ground targets, light tanks, medium tanks, light pillboxes, whatnot. It can kill the enemy bases and the enemy airfield, or it can try to kill all of the enemy players. Killing tiny tanks and pillboxes from a bomber that was designed to go attack, large facilities and cities, bombing them from high altitudes is impossible. The bomb has to go straight onto the target, and if the target is moving, that's going to be very hard to do unless you're flying at ground level. Going for bases and for the airfield requires more than one bomber, or one bomber that goes back to base about 3 times, which obviously isn't going to happen. Somebody's going to shoot you down. So that's already two of our options down, and then the last one, well, you try to go and kill the entire enemy team with a bomber that, has decent armament on most of them. There's still a lot of bombers in the game that, still use 7.7s. I'm looking at you, Wellington Mark 10. And, a lot of these bombers simply don't have enough protection. They're not, good enough to protect themselves at most engagements. The only way a player could win a match in a bomber is to climb to space, camp there, and use the advantage of the enemy who is not above them, who can't boom and zoom, but is forced to make an attack from below. And players often do that, because they realize that using their bombers in any other conventional way simply doesn't work. So, why am I telling you this? Well, I'm telling you this because we're in Hokkaido, and if you haven't figured it out yet, or made a lucky guess, we're going to be playing against bomber spam here. The American team has rolled out a, metric shit ton of B-17s and B-29 bombers. Now, in a lot of ways, that's a huge problem, because their team is going to lose regardless of how to look at the position. Although, if all of these bombers flew in a formation, directed towards our airfield, which, by the way, can be destroyed without going for the bases, they could still have won the match. But instead what happened, again, bombers fell into 2 different categories. The players you see on the screen right now are the players who fly the bombers in the way that I find is unobtrusive. They go down low, they kill ground targets, they get a couple of kills, they get shot down, and that's the end of the story. The reason I love these players is because they don't make it annoying. As a matter of fact, they make it very nice. I was currently in the process of researching the engine injection system for this Griffin Spit, and so I was grinding a bit. And when I see a full bomber match, I get happy on the inside, because that means I'm going to be getting a couple of extra kills, and it's going to make the grinding a lot more effective. And for the majority of the time, these are the bomber parts you're going to meet. Players who are just honestly trying to get a couple of RP, grind that plane, get it spaded, and move on. But of course, players like using tactics, and eventually you'll realize that killing ground targets in this conventional way simply doesn't work. Like mentioned, you get a couple of kills, eventually somebody dives on you, and you're simply blown apart. So instead, players start using different tactics. For starters, they squad up. They try to get fighter support. Fighter support doesn't work. Why? Well, because the bombers spawn not just above, but in front of the friendly airfield. And so, by the time that the fighters have reached the altitude at which the B-17s spawn in, the B-17s are long gone. And I mean gone as in killed out of the match, because they simply couldn't reach them in time. So, okay, bomber support is out of the question, scrap that idea. How about a bomber squadron, a formation? Yeah, you might think that was going to work, but it isn't, because you still need fighter support in order to get 4 B-17s from the air spawn to the enemy base, bomb it effectively without being shot down, which you most likely will be, because when you're flying 4 bombers in a formation, everybody's going to be going for you, concentrating their firepower. So you're left with one last way of flying. Alone and sneaky. One of the enemy B-17s did just that. He dove down to ground level. He flew over the sea to prevent being spotted, and spotting players over sea is Quite a difficult thing, especially done from above. He managed to close into our airfield and he was taken out. And that was it, the end of the story. Now, at this point in the match, just for a bit of information, I didn't see a single target. I spent about 2 minutes climbing around just trying to spot something. I couldn't find anything, so I dove down and I started farming ground kills. Why? Well, because I really wanted that injection system. And after flying around a bit, getting some kills, I did in fact spot a dot. And I immediately knew not just what the player was flying, but also where he was going and what his intentions were. So I go and I start chasing him. Now, at first I was convinced that the B-29 must have been climbing to space, but it wasn't the case. He managed to get to around about 6k, and he was trying to outflank us across the map. The issue was he's big, slow, easy to spot, and there were no clouds between me and him when I was looking at the same direction. So I spotted him, I got myself into position, and with the Spitfire, a friendly Spitfire to my left, we've now put him into a position where he has to start making a move, a run for it. It's a last-ditch effort for him to get to the airfield. So I'm waiting for him to turn underneath me because I don't want to engage a bomber from behind. I want to make sure I make a vertical pass. So, a little tip for killing bombers, concentrate your firepower onto the engines, or better off, for a wing. Hit the right aileron there, comes clean off, his plane goes into dive, he was dead anyway, but to finish him off, add a couple of extra shells into the right wing, it cuts clean off. And that's about as easy as it is to kill bombers. Well, that and going for a pilot snipe, although with wing-mounted guns that's a little bit harder to perform, and preferably you should be coming in from in front and maybe slightly above. And that was it, that was all from that match. I killed a bunch of ground targets, got 2 bombers, and we got a lovely bit of RP. But it wasn't very nice for any member of the American team, because they just simply didn't have a chance in this match. And so, not being particularly happy of how the last match went, and because killing bombers is hardly a way to showcase a performance of a plane, I jumped into another match, and I got Krimsk. Now, Krimsk is interesting because it's, again, British and the Americans, the Allies versus the Russians. A bit of an alternate history map. I kind of like it. The problem is you're mixing together 2 nations with 2 different playstyles. You have the American planes, which are primarily boom zoomers, and you have the British planes, which some of them are still turn fighters at this battle rating, but for the majority of the Griffin Spitfires are energy fighters. The issue is these teams, and I've talked about this countless of times, just simply do not cooperate well together. Whether it's because the American pilots tend to be, well, lacking responsibility of flying, just recklessly not climbing, fighting Russians at low altitude, giving them head-on passes and turn fights that simply favor them every single time. And yes, when I talk about American players, I am not targeting Americans as a nation, as people who live in America. I'm targeting any player, regardless of where they come from, who are playing American planes. There's a huge problem there. And then I look up in the sky and I see something that I didn't see for a while. Sterlings. Now, Sterlings are the new British bombers introduced in patch 1.55, and it kind of shocked me in the beginning seeing them in this match, and I realized they're new planes. People want to fly them, people want to see how they perform. When you introduce new bombers, and with every single patch we get at least 2 of them, people start flying them out. So now you have a person who is flying a bomber, who, the bomber in itself is a useless plane. They're flying it stock, because the plane is stock and they want to just see how it performs, and they're flying it in a matchmaker where every single plane values is important. So I immediately knew we were up for an interesting match. So I made a bit of a bold decision. I decided to climb a bit more aggressively. That means I'm not side climbing, I'm actually going straight into the battlefield. My hopes are I could keep the enemies away from the bombers, keep the bombers alive for long enough so they can come to the end of the match. Hopefully the bombers could introduce some kind of ticket bleed, and I'm hoping that my teammates climb and are able to protect me as I'm doing some baiting. And as I check the actual scores, I realize that yeah, it's bomber spam again. This time, it's on our side, and that's the problem. Hokkaido is brilliant for British aircraft. Clubbing American bombers is always fun. I find extreme joy in it because it's free RP and credits. But when half of your team is in bombers that, even if they do their best, are simply not going to carry because the chances of a bomber winning the match are so slim, it's down to the fighters that now have to go 2-1 in order to win the match. And this match was one of the most stressful ones I played. I hate having to do this. I hate having to counter more than I can chew. So I chased the Yak 9P down, got a crit into his central gear leg. Lucky enough, whatever it was I hit was enough to get him to crash into the ground. And this is where the situation just got progressively worse. We've just lost the last remaining bombers. The Spitfire in the area and me are now, well, the last 3 fighters in the area. The I-185 now pulls up into a vertical. Out of nowhere comes an F8F1 Bearcat and decides that the smartest thing to do would be to go into a head-on pass with the I-185. And with that Bearcat out of the game, it's down to me and the Spitfire. That's it. No, I'm not kidding. We're it. There's no more teammates left. Now, I had really no more hope at this. I got 1 kill, the Spitfire's got 1 kill, and that's it. We're the only players who did something, and we're the only players left alive. So, we have to go alone against the entire enemy team. Chances are more than just slim. I did manage to get a critical strike to the tail section of the LA9, but it wasn't enough to eliminate out of the match. He was still flying fine, and I'm guessing I didn't manage to hit the elevators. So he goes out of the area, he completely evacuates, and I'm left with the I-185. Now I have to do something with this guy, and the problem is I spent too much ammunition and overheated the engine even further. I'm now in a position where I'm stalling out. I have to cool down the engine, and the I-185 is going to be coming down in a perfect hammerhead. Things were not looking good, and I kind of just lost all of that hope that somehow, in some miracle, in some fairy tale, we could still pull this match into a win. But when I'm going back into dive, I cool the engine, I close back the radiators, I spot a plane taking off from the enemy runway, so I make a run for it. The I-185 is now opening up from behind, so I have to evade his shells as well, and the Yak 3, this is the VK-107 that just took off, forces a head-on pass. I'm not going to take it, do put some shots into him, nothing sufficient, and knowing he just took off, he's not going to have the speed to turn fight. So I take the option to put the plane into a sharp turn and force the I-185 to overshoot, extend his dive, and start running. At least this gives me a bit of a better position to start engaging these two players. And at this point I realize that the Spitfire, the other last remaining plane on the game, is doing his best to keep the enemies that are about 10 kilometers away from me busy and forcing them into not engaging me. It was this player that basically drove the entire enemy team away from me engaging these two players. They gave me the time, they gave me the option to eliminate them out of the match so that we had a higher chance. In theory, in the best possible situation, we should have been fighting together. We should have been on comms, we should have been teamworking, trying to bait for each other, but with the entire enemy team still left alive, even 2 players cannot really hold up. I think we were better off going in a 1 versus 2 on individual sides of the map. So I make a call, I turn around and I engage the Yak 3. Now he bluffs a bit of a head-on pass because he's low on speed and he can't commit. I evade the shells and go into dive after him. Simple as it is, latch onto his 6 and get ready to finish him off. The issue is, again, I didn't have trigger patience. I kept firing, trying to get this guy eliminated as soon as possible before the I-185 managed to get his way back. And this again cost me a bunch of ammunition. Ammunition that I desperately need if I try to carry this match. So I finally set the VK-107 on fire, but the I-185 is coming back. So I have to do a really funky evade there to force him into not putting any shots into me. Now, he is trailing a bit of smoke, so I can assume that his engine is going to be lacking a slight bit of performance, and the Yak 3, even though they might be prone to taking fires out, was not able to prevent it from spreading. He was on low speed, the fuel tank caught on fire and just blew up. This puts me into an ideal position. I'm now chasing the I-185, and I feel like I've regained some of that confidence that I've lost throughout this match. I could potentially come back from this. So, trigger patience wise, this is where I first started thinking smart. I'm closing on the I-185, and even though I'm now within my convergence, which is 300, which means you can still open up at 600 effectively, I'm waiting for the perfect moment. I don't want to waste any more ammunition than I have to. So I wait for him to go into a turn, put a quick burst in, and take off the tip of his right wing. He's more or less dead, but just to be sure, I put 1 more shell into him, a quick burst, take off his left wing as well, and finish him off. And as I looked in front of me, I see 2 planes making their way over here. And it was at this point that I realized that this match was getting worse by the minute. The longer I'm alive, the worse the situation is going for me. So what I actually have to do now is I'm running away. I'm not running away from them, I'm not trying to hide, not going to be returning back to base, I just need to get some separation. Dogfighting over the enemy airfield with 2 players is complete suicide. Now, the Spitfire has been shot down, that leaves me against 2 LA9s, but there's a third one, there's a Yak 9 UT that's also making his way back in. Now, yeah, one of the LA9s, the power player, he has his tail section damaged, but so far he hasn't shown any significant problems with it, so as far as I'm concerned, the plane is still in perfect performing. This is where the problem comes in. Look, I'm a decent player. I have a set of rules that I tend to follow when I'm flying, but there's no guideline. In a situation of 1 versus 3, where your engine is overheating, you're low on ammunition, and there's 3 players at better altitudes and better speeds. There is no guideline for that. There's no, success rate. There's no way for me to guarantee that I'm going to get out of this alive with 3 kills. And with the LA9 slowly but surely closing in, it's now or never. I have to make a move. So I put the plane into a split S, and I'm going to be forcing a head-on pass. Now, before I engage him, what I do is I just slightly jinx the right wing to force those first shells to fall short, and as he tries to evade, those 423mm that are mounted on top of the fuselage in the LA9 were not able to be, still aimed at me. So, in a way, that was a rather safe head-on pass engagement. But the LA9 puts the fire out. So, back into another split S, this time coming in inches from the nearest tree, because this was the only way that I could force these players into overshooting one more time and hope somebody makes a mistake. And the first one to make it was the Yak 9. He goes into a left-hand turn, he isolates himself, and a quick burst was enough to deal with his right wing. But we're not out of the danger zone yet. The LA9 is now coming back in, so I'm flying at treetop level, and the reason I did this is because his angle of approach was so steep that he couldn't dive, otherwise he would have pancaked. So I force him into an overshoot, he tries to retain some energy, but he didn't expect me to zoom back after him. And that's the joy of energy fighters, especially Griffin Spits. The energy retention is phenomenal, and there was no problems for me to get back up onto his 6. So I took out his flap, which is good but not quite sufficient, and even though I've tail critted him previously, he's still flying fine. And speaking of planes flying fine, the LA9 who I set afire is now making his way back. So again, another sharp dive next to the treetops, and then straight back up we go. The problem is now I get completely confused. I lost track of the first one, and luckily somehow he was right where I wanted him to be, and I take off his right wing. There was no planning involved there, he just happened to have turned in the wrong moment. So I've managed to turn it around. Well, that beside the fact that the LA9 is still alive, flying behind me and somehow catching up to me. So instead of going into a turn fight with him, or perhaps going into a head-on pass, I figured I'd use a bit of a trick that I've learned over the past couple of years of playing this game. It's called the hide and go around the hill. There's really no way that I can name it, but feel free to come up with your own versions of this maneuver in the comment section below. So what I do is, I get some separation, I fly above a hill, and as soon as I reach the end of it, I go into a dive. I cut the line of sight. He now doesn't see me. He knows I'm somewhere in the area, but he doesn't know exactly where. So I come straight back around, push the plane into a sharp turn, and when the LA9 finally spots me, he wasn't able to put any shots in. I just complete a 360 turn, he goes into a right-hand turn, and I come out straight behind. Perfect positioning, perfect maneuver to execute, and a little trick that I think everybody can get a use out of. And this is where I make the same mistake again. I'm not conserving the ammunition. I get some sparks into his left wing, and, when I finally realized that what I should have done is just waited for him to go straight up into a vertical, which he ends up doing, and, a simple burst, it will be enough to finish the job, I'm down to 42 shells. And this is where I stood in front of a decision. Go back to base, rearm, get some ammunition, refuel, or go straight for the last remaining player, because there's 2 of them left, and one of them is the Tu-2As that's about to crash. The problem is, the last remaining player was going for me. It's an IL-10, and when I saw him I thought to myself, I think I made the wrong call. Right here I still had a chance. I could turn left, return to base, rearm, repair, and at least force him into, trying to strafe me, and if he comes close enough the AAA should take care of him. Instead, I make the wrong call. I turn into him with 42 shells left, which is, 10 per gun. I go, and I just thought, let's finish this off quickly. And immediately he put some hits into me, and one of them goes into the engine block. It's now slightly yellowish, which might not look like a problem, but the engine was slowly but surely losing performance. And I simply could not keep up with the performance of the IL-10, even though it's an attacker, and it's a heavy one at that. The issue is he has a 23mm gunner in the rear, so if I come anywhere close to that plane, I'm gonna be shot down. And right here I realized that my engine is again overheating. I'm 50 seconds away from killing the engine completely, and I realized that he's catching up to me. Even if I try to make it back to base, at this point it's too late. I've reached the point of no return. It's either kill him or he kills you. So I turn back into him, go into a fake head-on pass, he takes a shot, I go into a turn. The plane, I don't know what he was flying on, but that engine had massive amounts of performance. Rather that, or my engine was simply slow dying out. I think that was the case. That little bit of a hit that he managed to put into it was just simply draining up to 30% of performance. So into one last dive, this is it. Either kill him here or he kills me. There's nothing else I can do. The engine will be dead. So I take the lead, get some hits in, 2 more bursts, spark all over the aircraft, and heat sets me on fire. Now, luckily enough, the fire will go out because I ran out of fuel, but that also means that the engine is going to run out of fuel, and the only thing I can do now is to make an emergency landing on water. I think it's needless to say the ending of this match was extremely disappointing, and to be honest, I was quite pissed. You know, I did my best, at least I tried to, and we lost the match because I made a wrong call. A call that I think 99% of you would have made right. I had nothing to do with 42 shells of ammunition. With 10 shells per gun, it should have been automatic to assume that I need to go back to base and rearm. And I don't know what it was, but I made the wrong call and it cost us the match. But at the same time, it was fun. It was challenging, and it was a match that wouldn't have happened if our team didn't die in the first 5 minutes. I mean, these are the type of matches that are rare. They're far in between, but when they happen, and when you are able to get 6 kills out of it in a situation, for example, the 1-3 game, they're phenomenal, and they make for some incredible footage. So a huge shout out to the Spitfire pilot. I wouldn't have survived the first two engagements without having his support on the other side of the map. And I know, as funny as it might sound, the fact that we stayed on separate areas of the map was the reason we were able to, well, come close to nearly winning the match. So yeah, hope you guys enjoyed the video. Let me know what you think about the Spitfire F Mk.22 or the Griffin Spitfires in general in the comments section below. Also let me know what you think about the bomber spam. Let me know which plane I should fly next. But until next time, take care and safe flying. Hey guys, welcome back and welcome to a 15,000 subscriber giveaway special. I've been around for